Welcome to Sweet Tea and Tacos. I'm Dave.
And I'm Jen.
Coming to you from our kitchen, and we've got cookbooks spread out, and we've been, doing our prep for the episode. This week we're talking about chicken pot pie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't really have chicken pot pie growing up, but I really remember that when I had it, like when we moved here. First of all, I don't really think of chicken pot pie as a very Southern thing.
Well, let me tell you the difference, I
right.
think, is that chicken pot pie is more of just an American thing.
Right.
And that's going to be with vegetables in it.
Right.
Things like carrots, English peas,
yeah,
corn,
and that's
that
what
kind of stuff.
Yeah, I remember having.
Right.
Yeah.
Chicken pie is more of a Southern thing.
Gotcha.
And it's kind of a cousin, I guess, in a way, to like chicken and dumplings and that kind of a thing.
Okay. And I know, the way we make it and the way you've seen it was sometimes it's a pie crust and then sometimes it's a biscuit, like basically just biscuits put on top. But that's the one I never really liked.
Yeah. It can be a little doughy.
Yeah, the pie crust one was always the good one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And that's what you make. Now, how did you kind of start when did you start making pot pie or pot chicken pie,
right.
I should say?
Well, I guess the reason that I started making it, and it would probably be around the time we got married, was because I ate it growing up. My mom made it, and it was one of my favorite things. Now, and I think I've referenced this on a different episode. I think maybe the one about Mother's Day,
right.
and some of the cooking that our mothers did. But my mom's version was actually a shortcut version because, and I've mentioned this, she had some health issues.
Right.
And so to make dough from scratch it's kind of a big task. So she just used like the frozen pie crust.
Right. Okay.
That you'd get at the grocery store. They came in a tin and everything.
Right. Okay.
But she would just let them thaw a little bit and cut them. She'd cut strips and that was her crust. She would do the lattice top.
Okay.
But it was one of my favorite things. It was just very comforting, and it was typically kind of a Sunday dinner, Sunday after church type meal. But my mom's deceased, of course, and so I called my aunt, her sister, to see did they eat that growing up. Was that something that they had? And she said yes, that my grandmother did make a homemade chicken pie.
Gotcha.
And so Mom was kind of carrying on that tradition. She just had to amend it a little bit,
right.
And like I said, do a shortcut. But anyway, when I started making it, I wanted to do a crust from scratch.
Right.
And I found this really amazing crust that I've used all these years. And, it's kind of become one of my things.
Oh, yeah. And the kids love it. I love it. And to me, the crust is a huge part of it.
It is. It definitely is.
And so, and when you look at recipes, there's so many recipes out there today that are shortcut this, shortcut that. And shortcuts aren't bad.
No.
But you do sometimes lose flavor in them. And there's ways to do it. And we'll talk a little bit about our method, or your method, that you can still get a lot of flavor, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time.
Right.
So basically, kind of describe your method a little bit.
Sure. Okay. Well, what is really key is also your chicken. Mm-hmm. So you need to start with some good quality chicken.
Right.
And I recommend getting some that has the skin on and the bone in,
right.
Because that's where you're going to get your flavor. Mm-hmm. But, you can go with whatever you prefer, white meat, dark meat, a mix of both. Mm-hmm. You can cut up an entire chicken, however you want to do it. But you're going to basically boil that or kind of simmer it on the stove. And it makes its own
broth,
stock, broth, whatever you want to call it. And I would typically add bay leaf, of course, to
gotta
that.
add the bay leaf.
Gotta have the bay leaf. But then maybe I'll throw in some peppercorns, or if I've got it, like some celery stalks and stuff like that.
Garlic, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And you just kind of let that slowly cook, you know, probably for about an hour on the stove. And then you've got that wonderful chicken to start with.
The stewed chicken and the broth.
So then, typically, you know, while the chicken is cooking, that's a good time to then go ahead and make your crust. Okay. And, you know, I've done it several different ways. I have done it in the food processor. Food processor. Yeah. And that would be a time saver. Yeah. And it works pretty well, I would say. And then you know, make it shape it into a disc, wrap it in, you know, some kind of saran wrap type something. And put it in the fridge and let it rest for at least 30 minutes or an hour. And then you get your chicken after it's finished, and you have to, you know, get the stuff off the bone,
get the skin, and get all that.
Yeah. You have to separate all that out.
Picking the chicken.
Yeah, picking the chicken, and our dogs go nuts when we're doing that. That's their favorite thing. They know what's going on, and they know they're going to get
there's some chicken scraps.
Yep. That's right. And then you have to make, I make a sauce, or I make a white sauce. It's kind of like a bechamel or something, to go in the pie. And I start with, you know, butter. I do a roux, and I add some of that good broth to it and everything. Then comes the assembly.
Right.
You know,
and you put it together.
Put it all together. So,
but just that crust, the crispiness of the crust with the creaminess and the chicken, just like the best creamy chicken. It's just a great combination. It's very,
very comforting.
Very comforting, very hearty. You know, but talking about shortcuts, you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, you could do a rotisserie chicken and a frozen pie crust and this and that, and you could, but, you know, the other thing you could do is kind of space it out a little bit. Now,
exactly.
And that's one of the things we do. For instance, get your chicken, throw it in a pot with water, let it cook on the stove while you're doing other things.
Right.
Cool it off, put it in the fridge, that's done.
Right. And then it can sit overnight.
Yeah.
And then, you know, maybe you don't have time that day to make it. So but the chicken's already cooked, and then the next day, you make your crust and put it all together.
Right. You can stage these things out, like make your crust.
Exactly.
It can be in the fridge overnight. It doesn't care about that. You know, so those are things you could do to kind of keep the scratch cooking elements of it in that homemade goodness.
Without it being just this
so much
ginormous sort of 2.5, 3 hour big production.
Right. And then you're just pulling it out. You got your chicken, boom, make a white sauce, roll your dough, stick it in the oven. Yeah. You know. Yeah. And the butter and the you know, as, you know, those you cook really know, the pie crust butter loves being cold. And that just helps it puff and really, you know. The kids love it. I mean, they just love it. It's a very mom dish. That's one of those dishes we talked about that the kids are going to remember from you.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know why we didn't really eat that growing up. But, you know, we use that technique for other things. We boil the chicken, you know, for a lot of things that way. And we don't use all the stock when we make pie like that. So, you know, but then
you can save it. You can freeze it. Right. Or then the next day you might want to make soup out of it.
Right,
or
use
whatever.
it for other things. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of things. Now we've made that. We use that technique to make it chicken stock. We do it sometimes with chicken thighs, just all chicken thighs. That makes a nice rich. We'll make soups that same way. Gumbo. Yeah, it's a great starter of a lot of elements. Whole chickens, I think, do really well because there's a lot more skin. Right. And the skin makes a really richer broth, and you get gelatin, and you get more bones, and all of that really helps richen the broth up. So if I were saying the way to do it, I'd do a whole chicken. That would be me.
Yeah.
I think you get the best broth with the whole chicken.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, this is hard to come by. But if you can find an old chicken.
Oh, okay.
This is coming across sounding weird, but like a hen that is of old age, like
Gotcha.
say a 5-year-old bird, you're
Yeah.
going to get a tremendous amount of flavor.
Right.
Nowadays, the chickens are just real young, and they unfortunately are not as flavorful.
Not as flavorful. And there's a lot of things that have happened to ingredients. That's maybe a topic for another podcast that have changed how we do things.
Right.
Some of the research we've been doing for topics and shows. But yeah, the scratch cooking, even though you can take shortcuts, man, I always feel like we're losing flavor and you're kind of like not doing it justice. It's like, why are you doing it? You're kind of doing the idea of it, but not really. The flavor to me is really the point of it, not just making a pie.
Right. Or at the very least, do it sometimes,
Right.
and if you have to take some shortcuts sometimes just to get the meal on the table for your family.
There is that.
But yeah, like make some special occasions where you kind of set aside the time and you do it all from scratch, and it's a real labor of love. You're going to enjoy it too.
Right. Now, when we were talking about this and kind of our research, we talked about chicken and dumplings and how there's a lot of similarities there.
Yes.
And did you have that growing up much?
No. Really, the only time I remember eating chicken and dumplings was maybe at a restaurant or at something called Dinner on the Grounds, which is a very Southern thing with churches.
Yeah.
Where
I discovered that early on.
it's kind of like a homecoming for people who have been part of that church in years past.
Right.
They come home for this one special service, and then everybody in the community brings a dish, and they have it, outside. It's all laid out on the tables, and the church that my mom was part of growing up, they would have dinner on the grounds, and I remember eating some really, really good chicken
food.
and dumplings at that.
Yeah.
But my family didn't really do it, and that goes back to my grandfather, my mom's dad.
Yeah.
You kind of know about this.
Yeah.
I mean, you never knew him. I never knew him. I mean, he passed when I was very, very young. But he had this thing about kind of dough and doughy stuff.
Oh, really? So you didn't like chicken?
No, and this
Interesting.
The
Okay.
thing about
the biscuits, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So he, like on biscuits, and we can talk more about this, and I've written a blog about it, but he didn't want a lot of
dough. He
dough
liked
in
the crispy
his biscuit. He just wanted a top crust and a
Right.
bottom
Well, I can
crust.
see how he'd
And
like
so
a chicken pie. Then.
He didn't like dumplings for that same reason, because he just felt like it was this kind of gummy,
Right.
doughy mush in his mouth.
Interesting.
And so I think probably my grandmother just would do a top crust on
Right.
her pie, for that reason.
Right.
And it was just nice and crisp and all.
Yeah, that's another thing. Top crust. You only do top crust.
Oh yeah.
And I think the couple times we've tried a bottom crust, we just hadn't had a lot of good luck with it. So
No,
just
I don't.
and usually we do it in like a long 11 by whatever Pyrex glass dish.
Right. I would say do it either in a nice ceramic kind of rectangular
Right.
casserole type dish or something like tempered glass. And yeah, I mean, but you want to roll your dough pretty thin because you want to make sure it gets cooked through.
Right.
And also that lattice technique that my mom did
That
works
helps.
really well, because
Right.
then the air gets all around it. And
Yeah, I just like
really
having more crust
crisp.
though. Crust is the thing there. But I feel like I'm being a little ADD tonight. But going back to the dinner on the ground, so we didn't have those. I know where I was in California.
Yeah.
So when I moved back here, I started experiencing those, and man, yeah, you're right. But what we did have one time, I remember we would have potlucks. We call them potlucks. Usually it was at the school, and I remember one time they called it a dime a dip. So it was a fundraiser, and everybody, so it was a potluck, but not really dinner on the grounds. But in some of my work in when I was working for public television, did a story on a church way out in the middle of nowhere, and it was a dinner on the grounds, and it was, old church.
Yeah.
And I think this was in the early 90s, and this was their 150th anniversary or something, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just some of the best cooking you're ever going to have.
It is.
But it's interesting. Our daughter loves chicken dumplings.
She does.
Yeah, I like it okay, but I like chicken pie a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Me too. But like you say, they are kind of similar. And I mean, we looked at some recipes because we just honestly don't make chicken and dumplings.
Right.
But I guess it's sort of the same concept. It's just cooked in a different way. Now we did see that some of the chicken and dumpling dough didn't have butter in it,
right?
But it had milk. I don't put milk in my pie crust,
right?
And I definitely do put butter. So it's a little bit different, possibly. But it's that concept of using the broth.
Yeah.
You cook the chicken the same way, and then you cook that dough. You cut it up, or you can throw it in balls or pieces, and then you boil it basically.
Right, and to me, that's what I feel like. That was my idea of. I expected chicken and dumplings in the South, but not necessarily chicken pie. But it's interesting that and like I said in our research, that chicken and dumplings, it's fairly ubiquitous around the country, but in different forms, and that the South seemed to be more of the flatter dumplings to me that could almost be like you rolled out a pie crust and then cut it up and just boiled it in there.
Yeah.
Whereas other areas, it was more of almost like a matzo ball type dumpling. But yeah, no. So chicken pie is just one of those things we really enjoy. It's a good winter dish, but we like it whenever.
Yeah, we like it kind of year round.
Yeah.
You can have it in the spring and pair it with some asparagus or a salad.
Right.
And
like I said, we use that technique a lot for a lot of things. It's techniques you can use for other things, and you probably do. And you can make ahead. You can stage it out. You can, but just it's hard to beat a good cream sauce and a well-made stock and a good butter-based crust. You can't really beat that. And then when you do shortcut some of those things, it's the idea of it. It's not quite as good. We're always a little disappointed when we try to rush it or something. But
well, and also we were talking about how you can do a meat pie, with like beef. That's kind of a similar concept, and I used to do that some.
Yep, I remember we've done that a few times.
And so you take cubes of whatever beef, I don't know, sirloin or some kind of chuck roast or whatever,
and you sauteed them.
You sear it,
you seared them,
and then you I guess add a little bit of flour and some kind of liquid. You could do wine or broth, or
beef broth, right?
Yeah, and make a little kind of sauce, and then I would typically add some mushrooms in there.
Yeah.
And then do the crust same way, and bake it.
Right. So something similar if you were going to make a beef stew almost, except with maybe less liquid and a crust.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So that's chicken pot pie.
Yeah.
One of our favorites. Chicken pie. I keep saying pot pie, but it's chicken pie. Chicken pie.
That's right.
Stop saying pot pie. But
it's making me hungry.
I know, we're making ourselves hungry again. But anyway, that's Sweet Tea and Tacos for this week, and we thank you for listening. We hope you will continue to listen. Send us a question, let us know. Dave at sweetteaandtacos.com or on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook, Sweet Tea and Tacos, or, send us an email. Let us know. Put a comment. Give us a comment about, do you have chicken pie growing up? Did you call it chicken pot pie like I always do? Or did you have chicken
and dumplings? Yeah.
And then another thing we're trying to get started. Life has taken over like last couple of weeks. We got a little busy.
Yeah, with things opening up a little bit.
Yeah, but what did you cook this week? Let us know. We're going to try to get that going and say, hey, what did you cook this week? What did we cook this week? What did we cook this week?
I don't remember. But
Since
I
last
will
week.
tell you, we have cooked some things during this shelter at home. I mean, we have just cooked and cooked and cooked.
Right.
And we love to cook, and it's been wonderful. But I feel like we got a chance to kind of hone some skills.
We certainly did.
That had been, atrophying a little bit. And it's been nice.
It has been nice. And then we don't always have time to just cook whatever we want, whenever we want. Like most everybody, we have a life and a budget and kids and business.
Right.
And we did have a fun little one the other day. Last week, it was one of those, okay, what are we going to do tonight? It's like, I got 4 things in the fridge. What am I going to do with them? And it started out as one thing and turned into Cincinnati chili. So,
we were thinking red beans and rice.
Right. That was where it was starting.
Yeah, and then it ended up with Cincinnati chili.
Cincinnati chili over pasta.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the adventures in cooking we kind of have sometimes. But so let us know your adventures in cooking and keep cooking. So that's Sweet Tea Tacos. I'm Dave.
And I'm Jen. Thanks for listening.